ailemiz geldiğimiz için çok mutluyuz.
Bizde de aynı hava var bizim üniversitede.
Çok güzel yani işte.
Muhafazakar, işte solcu. Bu çocuklar iç içe yan yana yani.
Bu şimdi açık mı? Şu.
Bir şey var ya, hızlı bizi biraz çocuk yetiştiremeyecek.
Şey değil mi? Yani dedim mi sana önce? Vakiti kullanma konusundaki şeyimiz bizi aslında sınırlıyor. Şunu bayağı bir geçtik zaten. 2,5 değil mi? Yani işte biraz. Dear guests, I am Yüksel Taşkın from Marmara University. So we are going to have sixth session of our conference on the AKP. The first paper will be presented by Professor Ümit Cizre. She's from Şehir, İstanbul Şehir University, a political science professor, and currently director of the Center for Modern Turkish Studies. She received her BA degree from London University and PhD from Ankara University. Professor Cizre taught as the Ertegün visiting professor in Turkish Studies in Princeton University and held research positions at European University Institute in Florence, Princeton University and Binghamton University, SUNY. Her primary research interests cover democracy problems, civil-military relations, democratic governance of security sector, nationalist and right-wing politics in Turkey. Her paper title is very interesting, the AK Party as viewed through the lenses of Birikim's Socialism, a journal I also contribute to. So floor is yours.
Thank you. Without much ado, because I'm short of time, I know I'm just plunging. Today I'm going to convey my findings on some selective writings. Sorry, I'm a teacher. I can always, make myself heard. I'm going to convey my findings today on some selective writings and my selective readings of some selective writings of selected writers. The editorial troika of the left-wing journal Birikim since 2002 focused on the AK Party. The editorial troika consisting of Murat Belge, Ömer Laçiner, and Ahmet İnsel. I hope to clarify my research problematic as I go along because I really don't have time to dwell on it too much right at the very beginning. The idea for the Birikim Journal occurred in 1975 during conversations between two inmates in Selimiye military prison, where this is between Murat Belge and Ömer Laçiner. They are the two members of the Troika, as I said, the decision-making body, in other words, who had been incarcerated in Selimiye military prison for being members in an illegal left-wing organization and for instigating plots, subverting the state, in other words, plots against the state. During the first phase of the journal, from 1975 to 1980, when it was closed down by the military coup, the goals of the journal, as put by Murat Belge, is to bridge the gap between militancy and knowledge, or to put it differently, to bring together ideology and praxis, if you remember, which was a hallmark critique of Turkish socialism in the 1970s. The Troika, Murat Belge, İnsel, and Laçiner agree on characterizing Birikim Journal in its first phase, 75-80, as a posture journal, tavır dergisi, which means that it tasked itself with socialist positions and therefore, confronted issues on the street from the point of view of socialism. Tavır dergisi. In the second phase of the journal, which started in 1989, the influence and impact of the journal spread beyond socialist values, and that's why we're dealing with it today. Why? Again, to cut the story short, Ömer Laçiner very succinctly and very honestly, very candidly, explains the new inspirational prominence of the journal by noting that after 1989, socialists in Turkey had stopped taking positions, just as socialists in the world stopped taking positions, because socialism lacked momentum and ideas at the specter of the prominence of the new neoliberal reality. Not taking a position, however, provided an advantage for Bilgi, because it became a platform journal that redefined socialism and took an interest in Turkey's prominent fundamental issues through three methods, a platform journal through three methods. First, by self-criticism. You cannot imagine how hard this has turned out to be. Second, by understanding and confronting the challenge being the free market ideology. But rather than scorning free market ideology ad nauseum, understanding first and then challenging it, or both at the same time. Thirdly, the third instrument through which it redefined socialism was by prioritizing democracy as an internal and external condition for its own existence. That is, the internal one being the democracy deficit of Marxism, the external conditionality coming from the democracy deficit of Turkey. So he had to address both. The AK Party's emergence in 2002 and its search for a new identity overlapped with Birikim's actually continual ideological reckoning with the tragic defeat of socialism, as they put it, from the 1980s onwards. I found it very interesting. That's why I took up this particular research topic. I find it interesting that their paths, the AK Party's and the Birikim's path, cross in their struggle for redefining themselves. Based on the Troika's post-2000 analyses and commentaries, I analyzed 4 areas where Birikim's re-examination and redefinition of socialism result in its critiques of the AK Party. The first relates to the nature of the AK Party's socio-political base, socio-political and class base, actually, that supported its emergence. This is the first issue. Secondly, I asked the question, how does the AK Party government's path-breaking offensive to terminate the military tutelage, how does it impact the senses and sensibilities, as I call it, the senses and sensibilities of Birikim, if not the ideology, senses and sensibilities of Birikim, and its views on the ruling party? Why am I asking this question? My students, graduate students, would probably resonate with me here, because this is an important question to ask for a left-wing journal, because socialism in Turkey, as you know, has continuously subordinated its causes to Kemalism. And it has affiliated itself with Kemalist bastions of power, including the military. And Turkish socialism has this notoriety of allowing anti-imperialism to become a euphemism for its deep-seated nationalism. Okay, so it's interesting to see its reaction to what happened to the military. Third question, or the third area, is how does Birikim intellectualize the AK Party's political strategy and policy towards the ethnic, political, and cultural existence and rights of Kurds? And finally, how does Birikim problematize the AK Party's democratic achievements in the face of its adoption of a contradictory, regressive, patriarchal, and confrontational discourse? 4 important areas, and I'm just plunging in. Class base, the first problematic. Birikim views the AK Party as representing an unprecedented political peculiarity in terms of its class base and in terms of its authenticity, not as a continuation of NOM parties, National Outlook Movement parties, that is, the Welfare Party, and not as a foster child of Turkey's big bourgeoisie. This is a perception in some leftist circles, as you know, and nor as evolving from the center-right's Democrat Party. It views it as a unique entity, representing an entirely new party model, appealing to middle and upper classes, at the same time occupying the home of the now defunct center-right parties, and more importantly, drawing from, as a result of occupying center-right, drawing from a more elitist and broader support base. For Birikim then, the primary feature of the party is that, I'm repeating this, I'm quoting this, it is a party to class politics. It's a party to class politics propelled by what it terms as an authentic bourgeoisie. This term keeps coming up, authentic bourgeoisie, authenticity, authentic party, authentic bourgeoisie. Authentic because, I'm summarizing a very, very sort of, complicated discussion here, authentic because this bourgeoisie does not owe its emergence, its existence, and its fattening up to the established big capital or the state as such. Oh, I'm jumping. It's argued that this is not a party, however, which prioritizes conservative moral values at the expense of economic achievements. Lachiner's analysis especially is very interesting regarding the conservative character of the party. He deconstructs AKP's conservatism into nationalism and Islam as the two pillars. He claims that the party's actual commitment to conservatism is very weak, because these two pillars, nationalism and Islam, which were very popular in the 1990s within the center-right and NOM parties, actually are now associated with, identified with the moral and political bankruptcy of these parties. Therefore, interestingly, he claims, rather than reinventing these two ideologies, the ruling party tried to fill in the gap by espousing itself as Democrat. Whether or not, in Birikim's analysis, whether or not the AK Party achieves the goal of being a Democrat is not important. It is the intended function of being a Democrat here, which is important. Islam and nationalism gone, and therefore. In fact, my inference, in a nutshell, my inference from the writings of the Troika is that in mounting its attacks against the Turkish armed forces, against Turkey's big business, and in initiating foreign policy initiatives regarding EU, regarding the Middle East, this party, this government, is considered to have acted out of class-like, sınıf benzeri, this is the term they use, class-like motives to protect the economic and political interests of its conservative middle-class support base rather than any nationalist or Islamic concerns. This is Birikim's point. The second issue I'm going to now jump over to, the military. The Birikim group unabashedly lauds, claps the AK Party's disempowerment of the ruling military's high command's political role through investigations, trials, indictments, resignations, and a long series of legislative reform process. They find this inevitable. The party's challenge to the military's hegemony was all but inevitable, given the party's middle-class base again. As a party carrying out a bourgeois democratic revolution of the kind Ferhat pointed out in the morning, it had to deal with the military question. There was no way out. It had to deal with the military question to free the energy and dynamism of the unstoppable counter-elite, the middle classes. But, and this is important, although it claps the success regarding the military, causing the military's loss of power, Birikim, and I share this to some extent, I wrote about it, Birikim suspiciously senses a tendency on the part of the ruling party to keep close ties with the army high command as a last resort trump card. I have to read you this quote from Laciner. If, let's imagine, a serious left-wing opposition emerges in the future, the government would want to try to prepare the military to stage a coup, to serve the government's purposes. I know that beginning from the days the AK Party has cut down the powers of the army, it has been planning on how to bring the army under its control in this sense. I know, Laciner continues, I know this, even if I may not see any visible signs of it. This is what the logic of politics demands. The Troika's criticisms of Ergenekon trials hinges on precisely this point, this suspicion. Although they again clap and appreciate the investigations and trials of Ergenekon, which helped to reveal to the public that the TAF's plans had moved from military tutelage to military dictatorship, Birikim worries about the ruling party's focus on the criminal aspects of the case at the expense of confronting the cultural and structural root causes of the military tutelage in this country. Moving on to the third. This is the Kurdish question. Şimdi Ömer Laciner, let me start with Laciner because I think he summarizes. They all agree that they agree on fundamental issues, on their analysis of the fundamental issues in Turkey. Ömer Laciner reaffirms that socialists cannot remain indifferent to the struggle of ethnic, religious, and sectarian communities and minorities for equal citizenship, basic rights, and freedoms. But, like the others, but more so with Laciner, he then switches to a however discourse. This is what I call a however discourse. It is an affirmation of a classical socialist position. And it shows, actually, let me quote first. However, this does not mean, we reaffirm the demands of these communities for equal citizenship and basic rights, but however, this does not mean nationalisms of these communities can be tolerated and not be subjected to socialist critique. This shows the reluctance, actually, of Birikim Troikas. This shows their reluctance to stake out a new inventive position. This is my critique, actually. A new inventive and creative criticism of the established patterns of socialist thinking in which socialism and nationalism are irreconcilable in terms of their missions, visions, and historical origins. So I need to add to this fact the picture, the broader picture, in which the journal's writers' assessments of identity politics as a distortion or reduction of grander ideas, which is, socialism, obviously, is a reoccurring theme. There is this repetition of the idea that this is a reduction. This identity politics is reducing politics to the timeless and unchanging essences. It's an essentializing form of politics, so on and so forth. So when the broad picture, their aversion to identity picture is put in that way, I think we need to add the main explanation, which is that I think this aversion is built on the argument that Birikim Troika claims the power and attraction of identities in Turkey have emerged as a compensation for the loss middle classes suffered under the onslaught of neoliberal globalization. So there is this middle class analysis inserted here as well. But this is, of course, a familiar story of the Republic. Anyway, we will come back to it in the Q&A session. So the inventive part of their am I yelling too much? Oh, God. When I present to people, I get too excited. I have to calm down. 5 minutes? I can't. I really can't. I can't finish in 5 minutes. The Troika developed, however, an inventive new argument about the identity politics in terms of its analysis of the transformation of both Kurdish and Turkish nationalisms in the 2000s to a venal mode, which they label as identitarianism. This is no longer identity politics. This is identitarianism, kimlikçilik. Hardened identitarian movements for Birikim have mutually shaped both nationalisms and have produced a process of desensitization, enhancing otherization, something which is worse than hatred, they claim. Again, the prime mover of the process is the relentless phase of global capitalism, which propel helpless individuals to turn to platforms and parties which are fanatically focused on identitarianism. The parties that KCK arrests and all that, Birikim's account on the KCK arrests is also very different from the mainstream analysis. The mainstream analysis in Turkey have connected the strong stand the party took against the Kurdistan Union of Communities as a continuation of the military solution, a continuation of the state-centered strategy of trying to crush the PKK, etc. Birikim takes a different stand here again, for understandable reasons. The AK Party, yes, continued to use the traditional military approach, but simultaneously it has followed a new matrix of socioeconomic relations in the region, which is based on extending the dynamic of bourgeois democratic transformation it brought about in the rest of the country to the Kurdish region, so as to include Kurdish bourgeoisie within the same revolution. We can talk about it actually later. Let's come to the democracy, the Birikim's discourse on AKP's track of democracy. The Birikim Troika, there are 3 points here I can mention. They point to a persistent, illiberal, anti-democratic representation or sensibilities in the party discourse in contrast to its anti-establishment discourse. However, they think, this is the first important thing, they think both have coexisted for a very long time in varying dosages. They don't view it as being caused by despotic leadership, type-based personality, inept political leadership, but a consequence of a dizzying sets of political games the AK Party plays to serve power and incumbency. Let me start the other 2 explanations that will throw light on what they mean by political games they play to serve power and incumbency rather than consistency and rather than, principles. The first explanation is that the AKP's pro-status quo politics, or what is normally referred to as authoritarian line, they derive from a hegemony vacuum created by the collapse of the ancien regime. The AKP tries to compensate for the hegemony vacuum not by trying to change. The AKP tries to compensate for it, not by trying to change the ancien regime's culture, institutions, structures and practices, but making them dependent on itself, dependent on the AKP government. In addition, and this is so important, this keeps coming up, I don't think I can exaggerate it enough. In addition, this modus operandi of the party resonates with the middle classes, as Erdogan is aware that his style will not cost dramatic losses in votes among the conservative middle classes, because this style, this authoritarian and anti-democratic style, represents an existential style, a part of normal state of mind of Turkish middle classes. So the blame for anti-democratic tendencies, to some extent, is put on the compliance of the middle classes, as well as the silence of the Islamic intellectuals, which Professor Turan is going to deal with, I hope. 1 minute, okay. Recently, another argument, I have discovered another explanation, which offers some ramifications to this culture, essentialist, middle class centered, authoritarian tendency in the party. The illiberal switches in the AK Party, or the party's discourse, is a strategy to carry out a project of pulling back the middle classes who have fallen prey to capitalist lifestyles and capitalist values, pulling them back to a more conservative orbit. So rather than pulling back the non-conservative, let's say, liberal, secular, modern sectors to a conservative orbit, actually, he has a selective target, or the party has a selective target in its illiberal policies. They're trying to pull back the conservative middle classes to a conservative line of sort of thinking and line of action, because the support base of the party, for the first time in its history, has taken control of its destiny, yes, but the AK Party feels that a healthy dosage of conservatism is the key to ensuring that the middle classes continue to define the country's future, fine, but under the party's tutelage, under the party's control, without getting carried away with excessive ideas on democracy and excessive ideas on freedom. Let me end here. Am I on time?
Time is up.
Yeah, I tried very hard, but this is the best I can do, all right? Sorry about this. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, next speaker is Nuh Yılmaz from Marmara University. He is a foreign policy analyst, academic and journalist with broad work experience as executive director, bureau chief, columnist and editor. I'm sorry. Sorry for this. Columnist and editor. Experience includes head of quality assurance at Al Jazeera Turk. Teaching at universities includes George Mason, Trent and Marmara. Executive directorship of the Washington-based Turkish think tank SETA Foundation, as well as Washington bureau chief of Turkish media outlets such as Star, CNN Turk, Haber 24. Publications and appearances in major media outlets, including BBC, Washington Times, Al Jazeera English, Al Jazeera Arabic, The National and Foreign Policy. His presentation title is The Mutually Changing and Transforming Adventure of the AK Party, Liberal Alliance. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for inviting me to this conference. So my presentation is going to be an ongoing project, of course. So I'll try to be done when we have the deadline. But now I try to bring all those different problems or discussions between AK Party and liberals, and I try to again present the main headlines of those problems during my presentation. So let me just start with a short background. I know all of you know this, but I'll just go very fast. The AK Party is a solution to 1997 postmodern coup d'etat. So what does this mean? I mean, after the revolution, we all know that, I mean, especially during the intra-war Turkey, Islamism had a weak tradition, and right after those intra-war years, till 1970s, Islamism was a mainly intellectual movement. But after the 1970s, we saw the rising political movement called Islamism, which is the main representative of this movement is National Outlook Party. So this National Outlook Party in 1997 became a partner to the government, and then we all saw that in 1997 this was not enough, and Refah Party, at the time Welfare Party, was not able to create the discourse of legitimacy to be able to seen as a normal partner of Turkish politics. So I think AK Party is coming from this tradition. It has Islamist origins, but try to solve this legitimacy problem by changing itself and trying to turn this tradition into something else. That is why whether AK Party is Islamist or not is open to debate. I think Professor Turan is bringing this discussion to the panel. So I will not deal with that part. But I can just say this, AK Party forced the limits of Islamism, not only in Turkey, but also in the world, in the whole, not only in Islamic world, but also in general in the world. So what is the discourse of Islamism? What are the limits of Islamism? Who can be called as an Islamist? What are the criteria of to be seen as an Islamist? So whenever we start discussing AK Party and its relation to other political movements, we have to face with this reality, which I'm going to escape in this panel. So what was different for AK Party? I think the main difference between AK Party and the Refah tradition or national outlook tradition was the way AK Party sees the nature of its alliance. Because before that, when Refah Partisi, the welfare party, were in part of the coalition government during the 1970s or during the 1990s, they see themselves as a fully constructed party, have their own agenda, have their own projects, and they just wanted to complete their projects with those coalitions. But AK Party entered into these alliances in a different mood. Rather than pushing forward its own project, more see these alliances as a kind of open coalition in the sense that it opened itself to a possible and potential transformation and transition. So AK Party, as different from Welfare Party, was open to any kind of effect or impact coming from other parties. I think that was one of the key differences that really differentiates AK Party from Refah Partisi. That allowed AK Party to ally with a couple different movements on the way. And the coalition with liberals is a kind of fruit to this kind of look at the politics. So, alliance with the liberals, as I said, AK Party has founded several coalitions with multiple groups, but the long-lasting and the most effective one with the alliance was the alliance with the liberals. So, of course, when I say liberals in my presentation, I do not mean something literal. I do not mean this is liberal, or I'm not really going after who liberal is. But as we talk in Turkish politics, some of those liberals may not be so liberal, but they can be called only as liberal because of their lifestyles, etc., etc. So when I say liberals, I do not mean liberal Democrats, but liberals in Turkish politics. So that's why I use liberal as a kind of umbrella term, and I saw this transition, this alliance between liberals and AK Party as a kind of governance strategy, or to gather themselves around a common cause to change Turkey, or to achieve their outlook of Turkey. So liberals and AK Party elites together was to liberate the country from the authoritarianism of the bureaucratic elites. So that was the main pillar of this alliance. So I think it is important because once this basis is changed, we came to see more and more problems with this coalition. So there are several moments that we can identify this coalition has been damaged and turned into something else. So AK Party, what AK Party gained from this alliance? I think one of the most important thing for AK Party was to have a legitimate discourse. So this may seem trivial, especially if you are looking from some other countries from outside of Turkey, but that was one of the problems of Refah Partisi. Since Welfare Party was not able to transcend this problem, AK Party was dealing with this issue in a very, this was a vital issue for AK Party. That's why AK Party saw a kind of potential in liberals to create some kind of common language, common discourse, and common vocabulary to be seen by the sovereigns to transform the politics and to achieve its own, whatever the political outlook or political projects. Thus, liberal discourse strengthened the AK Party's political projects by solving this legitimacy and language problem. For liberals, as the AK Party seemed, for liberals, AK Party was the most reformist party and was the best option to continue the relations with the West compared to other alternatives in Turkish politics. Because if we remember again, once this coalition has been founded, there was a red apple coalition in Turkey, i.e. the ultra-secularist nationalists and ultra-nationalists created a coalition, and that was mainly anti-Western and anti-EU. So AK Party Liberals coalition allowed liberals to be in a safer and stronger coalition, stronger alliance, and also allowed AK Party to solve some of the problems with the bureaucratic elites. So when the problem started, I think this is also important, the problem started once this common cause was lost. I mean, some of those things have happened, especially in after 2007. Couple things happened in Turkish politics, such as discussions of constitution, discussions of headscarf, whether headscarf is allowed in common places, at universities, or in public service. These were some of the main discussions that really cracked this coalition, because this alliance, because once this idea of transformation of the bureaucratic regime into something else, once this common cause is lost, and we came to see more and more problems in this alliance. So the outcomes of the alliance, let me just go through with this very shortly. Outcomes of the alliance, so AK Party gained after the 2000, so this alliance created democratization of Turkey in the last couple of years. So we saw in 2010 referendum some of those main pillars of the military dominance over civilian politics have been changed, and couple reforms has happened. So these were the main results, main outcomes of this alliance. So during this alliance, AK Party gained self-confidence and started questioning the limits of liberal democracy. I think that's one of the things that really changed the game. Partly because of this reason, because AK Party after 2007-2008 started creating its own political project, started pursuing its own independent foreign policy, and started pursuing its own, started to create, or at least wanted to create its own language. We came to see frictions between the two movements. So this call for independence was something good for AK Party, and that same independence was not necessarily something good, seen something good by the liberals. So I'll give some examples about this, and will explain what do I mean by this. So I think one of the reasons one of the problems again between liberalism and AK Party, again, like the way AK Party sees democracy. So because when AK Party looked at Turkish system, political structure, it saw the limits of liberal democracy, because liberal democracy, even though solved some of the problems, was not really very effective to solve some problems that AK Party's own base has been experiencing for a long time, such as, again, headscarf, religious schools, etc. These were not really important issues for the liberals, and that's why when the headscarf issue came up, most of the liberals said this was not the time, this was not a good timing, because like first we have to go through this constitution, then we can start discussing headscarf. But for AK Party, for its own basis, this headscarf issue was quite important. Because of this reason, AK Party elites started questioning the limits of liberal democracy and came up with two important concepts. One of them is Islamophobia, and the other one is Eurocentrism. So to found its own critique of liberal democracy, AK Party turned to Islamophobia and turned to liberals and said, when you are really dealing with Islam and the demands of Islamist, or at least conservative people in the country, accused not only secularists, but also liberals as being Islamophobes. And also Eurocentrism, the second issue, because I mean, when we again start talking about parliamentarian democracy, when we start talking about democracy, we keep giving references to European style or Western style democracies. So in those democracies, as we all know, the public sphere has been founded with different forces. So there is no problem of Islamism, there is no problem of Islam in those countries. So that's why AK Party was not able to find its own space, its own place to breathe in those structures. That's why after 2007, in order to achieve these goals, AK Party trying to carve out its own space in that Turkish public sphere. So this created a reaction because for many liberals, majority of the liberals, this was not about democratization, but this was about Islamization of Turkish politics, because I mean there is an, again, like universal standard. If you look at West, so you can come up with a good idea, good model. Why do you really pushing the limits of this democracy? So I think this is one of the frictions between the two movements that really led to many of the discussions we saw in the last couple of years. So how many minutes? I'm sorry, I have 9 minutes, okay. So now, like from now on, I try to like give you some headlines. What were those problems that arose from this tension? The first title is Liberalism, Lifestyle and Discourse of Supremacy. I think this is quite important because starting with the Eurocentrism and Islamophobia discourse, AK Party tried to carve out its own space in political sphere, but liberals fought back with lifestyle. So you are not just trying to, the liberals saw this movement not as a kind of democratization or fulfilling the demands of AK Party's own base, but rather came up with lifestyle discussions, i.e. there are more pressures on our daily life. And this has continued in the last couple of years when we start discussing the regulation of alcoholic drinks or abortion and et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of the area of friction between the two movements. So lifestyle discourse by AK Party was a kind of indirect claim of supremacy. I mean, the liberals saw themselves as the best citizen, best humans in the world, and they have the universal standard, so they can make decisions about what is best for humanity, what is best for human. So why do you need really like all those things? So this was very disturbing for AK Party elites. That's why this created more and more tensions. So AK Party saw liberals claim as a source of universal truth, and this was really disturbing. So for liberals thought this critique would drag Turkey to somewhere where these peripheral fellows might brought Turkey back to some other places, such as like East, Islam, Orient, etc. So most of the liberals saw this, as I said, Islamization, or shifting Turkey from West and looking at East in those issues. So another concept that came to identify one of the disturbances of liberals was endişeli modern. I think we translate this as worried moderns. Is it? I mean, worried moderns. So endişeli modern. I think this is one of the most successful ideal types that has been first created by Sheriff Mardin and picked up by media very quickly and turned into a one of the key critics of liberals to liberals of AK Party. So this initially modern type again like pushed back on lifestyle issues, but AK Party saw this as a kind of white Turk demands, people who are not really communicating with their own people and religion. That's why this caused to another tension, another friction between liberals and AK Party. So liberals, in return, saw this as a kind of social conservatism, the face of social conservatism in AK Party, because AK Party should have been like a democratic party and should not be dealing with these social conservative issues. So authoritarianism is another title. I think this is also important because authoritarianism issue is the translation of this varied modern discourse into political realm. Because when we talk about varied moderns, we are on the level of lifestyle issues, but when we are on the political level, we start talking about authoritarianism. So liberals criticized AK Party as not understanding democracy very well, but falling prey to majoritarianism under the rubric of democracy. In return, AK Party fought back and again said those people are strangers, foreigners to their own countries and using Orientalist languages and continuing the Oriental despot discourse into the political sphere of Turkish politics. So EU anchor. This is, I think, a key issue as well, because once liberals supported AK Party, I think one of the guarantees that allowed liberals easily to support AK Party was EU reforms. Because when liberals looked at AK Party, of course, they saw people coming from national outlook tradition and some like suspicious Islamists. So, and how can we really trust these guys? So I think the answer was EU reforms, EU anchorage problem. So with EU anchor, really you don't really have to trust these subjects, but rather some structural reforms might really force these guys into move forward with some of those reforms. Thus, this turned into something structural rather than personal. So that's why I think EU anchor was one of the main pillars of the alliance between AK Party and liberals, as it gave more confidence to liberals that AK Party elites have been governable. So whenever, especially after 2008, 2009, when we saw more independence in Turkish foreign policy, this EU anchor discussion came up at like several levels, and liberals, in a more paternalistic approach, and mainly criticize AK Party by disregarding or ignoring or leaving EU anchor, thus risking Turkey turn its face from west to the east, thus can carry Turkey from west to the Islamic countries. So AK Party in return saw these critics as again like part of the supremacy discourse. So liberals sees like AK Party elites as primitive, childish, savage. So once you leave those guys, unleash those guys, they can go anywhere, but you cannot control them. So this was kind of like insult for most of the AK Party elites and created some other shifts. So shift of axis is another dimension of this. So this is mainly foreign policy discourse. Once AK Party started following independent foreign policy line, this has been criticized as shift of axis. Again, Turkey is moving from west to the east and more Islamization. Authoritarianism and Arab Spring. This is also another, I think, very important title, because AK Party, when it faced with the new problems arising from the Arab Spring, had to realign itself according to new realities on the ground. So once this was the problem, AK Party first wanted to like approach all those partners, all those parties in a more equal manner. But once there were more tensions in those countries, especially in Egypt, this created more tensions not only among liberals and AK Party, but also created more tensions in those countries. Once the Egyptian politics have been more polarized, I think this was reflected in Turkey and created more friction between liberals and AK Party. Because in Egypt, the Islamists were not the same with AK Party. They have not been part of the government, so that's why they were Islamist. So AK Party saw them as people who can learn how to work in that kind of environment, so approached more empathically to those guys, and liberals sided with liberals in those countries. So the tension in those countries reflected into Turkey, as we saw how to transfer authoritarian model from Turkey to Egypt discussions. So I just skipped some of those issues. And last point, the coalition of Sunnis, Kurdish issue. I think this is also important title because we saw recently the friction between the two parties when AK Party was dealing with Kurdish issue, because once AK Party brought up a more religious discourse, allegedly, I mean, and more emphasis on common religion, common history, and common values to solve Kurdish issue, this created a reaction on liberal part, seeing that this Kurdish issue should be solved under the, at least in an environment of more problems of citizenship, more rights, and liberal democratic values, etc. So this kind of language, religionia, is a kind of a coalition of Sunnis, because like PKK is mainly Sunni Kurdish group, so, and AK Party is a Sunni group, so it was codified as a kind of coalition of Sunnis by not seeing Alevite Kurds as organic part of this coalition. I think this is also related to suspicion of liberals to AK Party because they see mainly Alevites as a kind of guarantee to solve or to free this discussion from more religious discourse. So finally, so I think the conclusion, so the main friction right now between the two parties are the future projects. So because of the mutual suspicion, I think there will be more and more frictions in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last speaker is Burhanettin Turan from Şehir University. Burhanettin Turan is a professor of political science and international relations. He has taught at the Department of International Relations at Sakarya University. He was a visiting scholar at Center for Global Islamic Studies at George Mason University in the 2010-11 academic year. He is currently the chair of the Department of International Relations at the Istanbul Şehir University. His research interests include Islamism, Turkish political life, the history of Turkish Islamic political thought, and Turkish foreign policy. He has taught courses on Islamism, Turkish political life, history of Turkish Islamic thought, political science, Turkish foreign policy, and globalization. He has edited several books on Turkish politics, and his publications have appeared in a number of edited volumes as well as journals. His paper title is From Securitization to Empowerment, Dilemmas of Islamic Intellectual Opposition to the AK Party.
Thank you. Well, let me start by stating the limitations on my paper. Well, my paper is based on the selective reading of some leading Islamist intellectuals, Ali Bulaç, Akif Emre, Ahmet Taşgetiren, Fatma Barbarosoğlu, İhsan Eli Açık, and Rıdvan Kaya from different journals and newspapers. This paper doesn't include any reference to Gülen movement or Kurdish Islamists, unfortunately. And also the Kurdish question is not within this paper. Well, in recent times, it has become a commonplace claim that Islamist intellectuals or writers are silent on the issue of criticizing the AK Party government. What's the main reason for this silence? It is mentioned that is the pragmatism of taking advantages of the opportunities that have been opened up by AK Party government. It is also argued that Islamism in Turkey has been absorbed into the government and has lost its authenticity, alternativeness, and autonomy. This is also seen as very related to the Sunni notion of transcendental state. The arguments explaining this silence can sometimes even reach the level of neo-Orientalism by claiming that criticism is always absent in Islamist sectors in the Turkish society. My presentation begins with the following observation. Islamist intellectuals have developed criticism against the AK Party at various times since its establishment in 2001. A part of this criticism have no doubt taken the shape of self-critique. However, still it's difficult to argue that this criticism have created a strong political intellectual current. Rather, the tensions between Kemalists and Islamists further limited the extent of any internal discussions on the coming crisis of Islamic life for the Islamist movement. In this presentation, I will examine how the politicians, ex-Islamist politicians, are criticized by Islamist writers. I will try to delineate the reasons for why Islamist critics have been weak by analyzing the challenges that Turkish Islamism has faced during the AK Party government. In trying to problematize the dilemmas of intellectual criticism to the AK Party, my presentation first addresses the complex nature of the relationship between Islamism and the AK Party. Second, it focuses on the Islamist assessment of the AK Party performance on the issue of Kemalist tutelage and securitization. Third, it examines Islamist writers' criticism of AK Party's foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. And finally, I will try to concentrate on how the success of the AK Party and leadership of Erdogan and his new discourse of Islamic civilization discourage any further Islamist critique of this party's impact on Islamism. Well, starting with the relationship between AK Party and Islamism, as all you know, the relationship between AK Party and Islamism has always been found controversial and problematic by many people, of course, including Islamists. Because we know AK Party officials have persistently rejected the label Islamist. Even yesterday, Yalçın Akdoğan and Ertan Aydın, chief advisors to the Prime Minister, did the same thing. But this doesn't mean that AK Party has not followed a politics of protecting Islamic sensibilities in its discourses and practices. Especially after 2010, there has been a growing number of Islamic references in Erdogan's speeches, ranging from the idea of Islamic civilization or emphasis on justice or human beings as the vicegerent of God on earth, and some repeated verses. Of course, this topic is the most difficult subject for Islamists. Because on the one hand, Islamist writers want to prevent the party from harming the Islamist movement by saying that its democratic, conservative democracy doesn't represent Islamism. But on the other hand, they also see that this party is increasingly providing a larger space for Islamists to transform Turkish society. Well, then this takes a form of dilemma for Islamists, whether the 10-year-long success of the AK Party belongs to the merits of Islamism or not. It was easy to contribute the AK Party's successes to Islamism when it denied being Islamist while escaping from its mistakes. The Islamists taking advantage of the opportunities provided by the AK Party in its struggle with the Kemalist establishment was also regarded as a kind of normalization. However, now AK Party is now standing in the middle of the Islamism debates. Erdogan's adding Necmettin Erbakan to his list of the AK Party's heritage does point a new stage in his dealing with Islamism. Similarly, the increasing number of Islamic references in his speeches contributes to this trend. The question of what should be done points to another dilemma for Islamist writers, because they are aware that they cannot mobilize the religious constituency against the AK Party. nor do they hold a prescription for any type of Islamist government. However, they also cannot stop in giving Islamic policy recommendations to this party, to a conservative party. In essence, this is about the fact that despite all that has been said to the contrary by Islamists, the experience of the AK Party in the form of success or failure cannot be easily separated from the adventure of Turkish Islamism. I want to give another example. The adoption of a liberal language by the Islamist circles and the AK Party in the struggle against Kemalism due to the alliance with liberals that Nuh mentioned has also been criticized. For Islamist writers, this is a conjunctural cooperation. This conjunctural cooperation with the liberals has turned into something that explains everything and has become an internalized worldview. And from that point, Islamists criticize both AK Party and themselves. They say, once Islamists have been experiencing power, enrichment, upward class mobilization, and they have pursued successful careers during the AK Party governments, opportunity spaces within the public sphere have opened up for Islamists so that they have now reached the higher echelons of bureaucracy. They have become advisors of state officials and owners of large companies and media groups. They are much more wealth-oriented than ever before. And accordingly, when faced with the secularizing aspects of being powerful and rich, many Islamists have experienced the loss of a certain spiritual identity in this period. Well, I should skip some basic points here, I think. Well, another example can be given from Fatma Karabıyık Barbarosoğlu. Actually, those who are most remarkable in their criticism of the AK Party are those wearing the form of self-critique. She contends that when the religious people brought a party to the power through their own votes in Turkey, they made their way of life indefensible. The striking example of this was the legitimation of the EU process to solve the headscarf issue. Well, the second issue that I want to raise in regarding to Islamist writers is the issue of Kemalist tutelage securitization. This is the most significant subject, I think, among these criticism, because they all agree that AK Party should try to get rid of Kemalist tutelage. But at the same time, they criticize AK Party not doing enough to get rid of Kemalist bureaucratic center. And I can classify three positions in terms of this criticism. The first position, exampled by Rıdvan Kaya, wants the Kemalist tutelage to be totally disintegrated as a requirement of being the government in power. The second position, which is Ali Bulach's position, offers that this has to be accomplished through a politics of negotiation by including different societal sectors. There should be a new social contract. The third position recommends a period of gradual transformation of the system while keeping in mind the AK Party's limitations. The possibility of Kemalist tutelage returning is very much alive as a reflex and a discourse among Islamists. You can find this reflex even some hardline Islamist critics. Well, this is basically related to Kemalist securitization, the issue of Kemalist securitization, because all we know, Kemalist securitization and control over religion in the name of secularism is a significant reason for the impoverishment of Islamism in Turkey. Well, maybe until now, until recently, this securitization conceals aspect of that impoverishment, but now it's very clear, and Islamists started to discuss the aspects of impoverishment coming from both being in power, including wealth orientation, consumerism, and others, and again from the securitization policies of Kemalism. I can say that until 2010 referendum, Kemalist securitization constituted an effective barrier to the rise of Islamist critique of the AK Party. But after from this time, there is a new stage, there is a new era. Just before 2010, AK Party, by following a politics of patience, was able to persuade its Islamist constituency in not doing enough to meet Islamic demands. But this has changed. And there is a new era, and AK Party has also left, postponing the religious demands of its constituency, started to implement desecuritization with regard to Islamist demands. I mean, freedom to headscarf at universities, opening of new immative schools, and incorporation of Quran and Siyar courses into the curriculum of at high schools. But this new process of desecuritization reveals several aspects of the impoverishments and the problems that are very closely related to the transformation of Islamism in Turkey. In a way, there is a challenge facing Islamists how to deal with the new Islamic language of the AK Party. I should mention an increasingly Islamic language of AK Party in the form of Islamic civilization. Well, this is not a new phenomenon. Just starting from its foundation, there was this notion, but maybe 2 or 3 years, this has become very manifest and very critical. With regard to AK Party's new Islamic civilization discourse, what's the dilemma facing Islamists? It's very clear. AK Party has met most of the Islamic demands, and the new ideological environment of Turkey is open to debates on further Islamic agenda. Will Islamist writers now, like in the 1990s, develop alternative Islamic formulas to both conservative democracy and Western liberal democracy? You will remember there was the idea of Medina document. Will they be able to present a new Islamic discourse that would go beyond their often mentioned dominance of liberal discourse on secularism and the consolidation of democracy? What is the Islamist vision of Ummah in front of the rising sectarian polarization among the Islamic states of the Middle East? You know, Iran is an Islamic state, Saudi Arabia is an Islamic state, and Turkey is ruled by an Islamically oriented party, and Egypt is ruled by Ikhwan Muslimin. Well, it's not an easy job. For the time being, the question is not about whether conservative democracy is a manifestation of Islamism or not. What is Islamism in this environment? Is it dead or alive? If alive, was it? What's the substance of Islamism with regard to these problematics? For instance, what is the Islamist formula in conducting a public negotiation between secular and Islamic discourses which might bring about a deeper explanation of the relationship between Islam and democracy, and which might lessen the polarization of secular and Islamic demands on the public arena? These are the issues, dilemmas to be discussed by Islamist writers. And the third issue is AK Party's active foreign policy and Turkey's new role in the Middle East. We all know Turkish Islamists have always criticized the Western-oriented foreign policy of the Kemalist Republic, particularly in reference to the Middle East and Turkish-Israeli relations. And also AK Party's recent active foreign policy and its claim of taking a leading role in the re-establishment of a regional order is also one of the topics engendering much discussion among Islamists. Islamists actually have split on the issue of AK Party's Middle Eastern policies. During the period until the Arab revolutions, the main theme coming out was the matching agendas with the US in the Middle East. AK Party was following an agenda of foreign policy which is very parallel to the needs and wishes of the US. And again, Turkey's policy of Syria in the last 2 years has resulted in different comments and criticism among Islamists. For example, Ali Bulaç and Akif Emre carry the view that the active role taken on by the AK Party in the region, implying that this foreign policy activism or Turkey as being model or being active in the Syrian civil war, these are actually more in line with designs and wishes of the Western powers, rather than being appropriate for the ideal of the Ummah in the Islamic world. Well, in a sense, they say that AK Party developed a multinational foreign policy, not for the Islamic Ummah, but for the framework designed by the Western powers. Bulaç, for example, blames the AK Party with becoming more aggressive in favor of the Anglo-Saxon Jewish alliance by leaving its previous soft power and economic integration perspective in Syria. He even claims that AK Party foreign policy has adopted a neo-Ottoman and unionist İttihatçı language. What should be done, in his eyes, is to establish Islamic Peace Force. And Iran and Turkey should come together and to find a solution to Syria. Well, of course, there are some Islamist writers who support AK Party's Syria policy. For example, Rıdvan Kaya, objecting to Bulaç's criticism of taking a strong stance against the Muslim-killing Syrian regime, he invites Bulaç to conduct an Islamic self-critique. Erdogan's proposal of Anglo-Saxon secularism to the Middle East was another issue to be criticized by Islamist writers. And they claim that the global system has designed a post-Kemalist period in which the secularization of social life would be conducted by leaving behind classical Kemalist secularism. And under the rule of Islamist parties, there would be a new Middle East which is integrated into the global economy, postmodern culture, and secularization. Well, there is something problematic here. Of course, from the position that I take, it's a romantic revival of the concept of ummah in these criticisms. Maybe more importantly, they seem to underestimate the potential and actuality of the competition of regional Islamic states. I mean Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. Because there are different national interests, and the polarization produced by this real competition of divergent interests has taken the form of theological and sectarian discourses, which goes beyond Turkey's capacity. In other words, the current political environment creates another dilemma for any kind of Islamist politics. Islamist governments of the region, including Turkey even, are struggling with each other and are not able to solve their regional problems. The fourth issue that I want to raise regarding Islamist critics is the success of AK Party and AK Party's new discourse of civilization. Well, one of the successes of the AK Party in its 10-year stay in power is its hegemonic ability to postpone the demands of Islamist voters and to legitimize its seemingly un-Islamic policies in their eyes. Well, here Erdogan's leadership and his style of politics is decisive in the continuation of this hegemony. He has close connections, communications with these groups, and he's able to narrow the area of Islamic opposition by assimilating any Islamist opposition into his own party. Numan Kurtulmuş, with the idea of Islamic civilization and justice, is an example to be given. The term Islamic civilization or our civilization represented a source of national and spiritual values, a symbol of belonging to the Middle East and the Islamic world, but at the same time, a keyword for humanitarian values. This multi-purpose concept of civilization has a multi-layered nature. I mean, national, Islamic, and universal values, interests can be incorporated into this concept. It's a vague concept, but it's flexible. AK Party legitimized EU process by this concept, or some Islamic references, some Islamic policies, again by reference to this concept. And I think this concept, the effectiveness of this concept, narrows the space for Islamists to oppose the AK Party government, because they know this language. They also use the idea of Islamic civilization, but this time, this is in the hands of conservative Democrats, and they employ it very effectively. Again, yeah, how many? Okay. Well, maybe some comments on the, again, AK Party's periodical assessment of the management of Islamic critics. Well, AK Party has been able to balance the weak criticism it received from Islamism between 2002 and 2006 on the EU process. For example, EU as a civilizing project was criticized and changed it into a new Islamic civilization. Again, AK Party was criticized by not transforming Kemalist tutelage, but we all know the Ergenekon cases and other cases about coup d'etats. So this time, party declared the end of military coups and securitization of Turkish politics. Again, on the issue of Kurdish question, AK Party was criticized not doing enough for Kurdish question, and again for the Roboski incident. But now, in 2013, we have a process, solution process, çözüm süreci, and AK Party is capable of incorporating some Islamist writers into the meetings of wise men. So, to conclude, the relationship between Islamist writers and the AK Party brings the issue of Islamism into the debate. And this will continue in the form of the revival of Islamism. I don't believe that it's that. The question of what happened to old Islamists is only part of the bigger picture. The actual agenda seems to be different than that. And Islamists have not completed their confrontation with their early Islamist practices, and at the same time, the needs of the new Middle East. So, Islamists are trying to cast their colors on Turkish public life and the future of the Middle East by seeking answers to three challenges. One is the necessity of compensating the impoverishing effects of Kemalist securitization. Second is the need of developing a new Islamist language to deal with the consumerism and capitalism. And the third is the need to deal with the potential Islamist movement's radicalization through a new sectarian polarization in the Middle East. And I think this is an exam that we will see the results. Thank you.
And now we will have time and opportunity to have a discussion. I think 20 minutes would be sufficient. It's okay, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. 3 questions I will take and then answers. We can start from there.
Thank you very much. It's a question for Nuh Yılmaz. I didn't understand very well your labeling of liberals. At the moment you transformed the wording in worried moderns, but as I understand, or as I could observe until now, the worried moderns have nothing to do with the liberals. If you talk about the lifestyle, these people have never been in alliance with the AKP. If it was the case, certainly the votes of AKP would not increase but decrease. From the beginning, they were very suspicious about the AKP policies, and I think that maybe you have another definition. Please, can you define again the liberals? If they are only modern, worried moderns, they were not associated, never, with the AKP politics, it seems to me.
I did not define.
Let's take two more
Okay.
questions then.
Sure.
First of all, thank you. I want to thank to my professors for their interesting presentations. I have two questions, one for Nuh Yilmaz and the other for Burhanettin Hoca. And first of all, I want to ask Nuh Yilmaz, you mentioned Welfare Party and AK Party, and I want to ask that even though Welfare Party and AK Party were legally elected by the Turkish citizens, why was the Welfare Party not legitimized and AK Party is legitimized now? I also want to hear your definition of legitimacy. And my second question for Burhanettin Hocam. Hocam, I mean, as we all know that Islamism has had interactions with other ideologies since the creation of modern Turkey. As last, we have witnessed Islamism interaction with liberalism, as Professor Nuh Yilmaz mentioned. But my question appears here that, is it the essential critique of Islamists in Turkey to the AKP that is the necessity, I mean, being in the necessity of using other ideologies as opportunity for Islamists to exist, but not being able to debate the Islamist ideology over Sharia, even though you haven't mentioned the term of Sharia in your presentation? Thank you very much.
And the last question of the first question.
Thank you all for brilliant papers. My question is to Nuh Yilmaz as well. I agree with your observation that the AKP or AK Party was disappointed with the performance of the liberals at certain stages, like the headscarf issue, like you mentioned in your paper. But I don't see the reason why the AKP, this makes AKP move away from liberal democratic agendas. In other words, is the limits of liberal democracy that you mentioned in your paper same with limits of the alliance with liberals, or are you associating alliance with liberals with liberal democracy? Thank you.
I think we can answer these questions, then we can have our conversation.
Okay, then let me just start with almost all of the old questions are about the same issue actually. So first of all, yes, I think that's one of the problems that I have to deal with in this paper, because when I work, this is not a theoretical paper in the sense that this paper does not really discuss the limits of liberal democracy or how can liberal democracy have been found or can be founded in Turkey, but rather what are the main friction points between AKP and AK Party and liberals. So when I say liberals, I did not mean liberals in the sense that we use the term to define certain people who defend liberal democracy, but rather I preferred liberal as a kind of, as a term, as a sign that have been used by everybody when we have discussions in political sphere to define some kind of alliance between people who supported AK Party on the way, on its adventure against bureaucratic elites. So in that sense, for example, Cüneyt Ülsever, I mean, we can discuss, of course, whether he is liberal or not, but at some point, he has been seen as a liberal, and I took him as a liberal, not because he's a liberal, quote unquote, but because people saw him as a liberal. In that sense, this lifestyle discussion may be defended not as an integral part of discussion of liberalism, of course, but some liberals adopted this endişeli modern discourse to raise their critics against AK Party during those discussions of lifestyle. That's why I agree with you. I mean, it is not only about liberals that only used endişeli modern in their languages, but some of them did. So in that sense, I try to see those tensions. And my definition of liberal, if we come to that point, liberal is the person who is called as liberal in those political discussions. I mean, this is not I'm not looking for an authentic definition of liberal or authentic liberal Democrats here, but in that kind of dialogical discussion that really created this transition in the last 10 years. So in terms of liberal democracy, because of this reason, sometimes when we really go into details of liberal democracy, yes, I mean, AK Party struggles with liberal democracy, but I mean, AK Party does not really try to create a liberal democracy or try to be as liberal democrat as possible. But because, I mean, they are in alliance with liberals, and this has to be sustained. In that sense, they share some points, and those some points sometimes coincides with liberal democracy, sometimes it doesn't. So when it is parallel with liberal democracy, my discourse shifts towards critique of liberal democracy. So AK Party, in order to escape from this dilemma, I think uses these two terms, as I said, Islamophobia and Eurocentrism, to say liberal Democrats and to accuse them as not being real liberal Democrats, and escapes from this liberal democracy discussion. And also the second exit strategy for AK Party is, I think, the conservative democracy, of course. Because what is conservative democracy? I mean, of course, if you are a member of AK Party, or if you're an AK Party elite, you can really write pages of defense of what is conservative democracy, but nobody knows what is conservative democracy. Conservative democracy, I think, is a sign that allows you to be a Democrat with certain baggage of Islamic values. I mean, that's why, I mean, they use conservative democracy, not as an academic term, but as a kind of very pragmatic term. When I said legitimacy, I mean, again, like, I do not want to go into details of legitimacy problem, but the thing is, when in 1997, the Refah Partisi was really isolated in Turkish politics when postmodern coup happened. So this shows that Refah Partisi was not able to really made itself recognized by the elites and seen by others, even by the bystanders, as a kind of party that transcends the limits of fair political play. So many people put the blame on Erbakan at the time. So, but now here, when we discuss AK Party, even though there are these kind of critiques, AK Party still finds its way to deal with the state apparatus, is able to ally with other groups in other segments of society, sometimes social democrats, sometimes like liberal democrats, sometimes like pro-Iranians. I mean, it changes. So in that sense, AK Party knows how to play this legitimacy game. So that was my main concern when I said legitimate.
Please, we don't have much time.
Well,
Maybe in the break.
when we look at the history of Turkish Islamism, we can see that there has been several times that Turkish Islamism influenced by the dominant ideological atmosphere of the world. For the late Ottoman times, this was liberal constitutionalism. For the first one-party system, one-party period, this was nationalism. And for the 1980s, this was communitarianism, or the rise of liberal democracy. And for the 1990s, this was postmodernism. So in a way, Turkish Islamism has been influenced by the dominant ideologies. But at the same time, there is a sense of continuity which can be stated as the idea of Islamic civilization since the Ottoman times. This concept of Islamic civilization consists sometimes some similar words to Sharia, but not Sharia. I mean, when you talk about adil düzen, implying that there should be Islamic law, at least for the religious people. Or when you talk about Medina document, you imply that there should be a rule of Sharia, at least for the religious people. But an overt, an open call for Sharia is absent in Turkish Islamist political parties and even intellectuals.
Tuncay Kardaş from Sakarya University. I have a question to Professor İlter. In your analysis of Birikim's analysis of the government, you seem to suggest that it all boils down to the critique of Islamist or conservative middle classes psyche. So it's not maybe even necessarily the dictatorship elements within the AKP elite, but more to the societal base of this group. If this is correct, this is correct, why do you think they do so? Why do you think they put their emphasis on these rather structural forces? Is it because they really think that this is to blame? Or is it more because of their, ideological leanings, Althusserian readings of politics? What's your take on this?
Okay, and one more.
Thank you. My question is to Nuh Yilmaz, and I'd like to know if you had the chance to diagnose liberals' perception about their capacity and tools to influence the directions of AK Party's reforms, because your presentation was more about motivations and actions of the parties in alliance, but I'd like to know what were the mechanisms that made this alliance possible, because at the end of the day, did the liberals just bandwagon with the possibility to jump off the train if the train takes a direction that they don't want to do in the future? So did they have the capacity to influence AK Party's reforms?
Okay. Yes, you're quite right in pointing out the way their approach is towards the AK Party. Bottom-up processes, conservative middle classes that are shaping the discourse of the party rather than the leader-dominated, Well, but what you have not mentioned, and which is very important, is that although it may seem like a structural, a typical sort of socialist approach, there is one thing that really distorts the picture. That is the culture essentialist perspective, which is welded to this view in the sense that, the ruling party, the independent variable is the bottom-up process. The sort of a group of people or a large group of people, a significant sector which votes for the party and which really doesn't care for democracy. So this is actually, if you translate it into political sociology, it would mean imputing certain characteristics to a certain class for sustaining a government which has authoritarian, anti-democratic, illiberal tendencies. So rather than adopting a completely structural analysis, they do adopt some cultural essentials elements in their explanation. This is something that doesn't fit into the socialist perspective, if you ask me. But this could be due to something else. This could be due to their own bias to the masses. I don't think, masses as such in Turkey is a concept that is welcomed, that is positively appreciated by either the right-wing politics or the left-wing politics. Nobody wants to be part of the masses in Turkey. Nobody wants to be part of the elites. You know, these two concepts, I think, are wounded concepts. They're not, they are sort of stained concepts. So I think, to some extent, think of the Kemalist biases in the past. There is this sort of, dislike. They're not neutral about the masses. They think they're not capable, perhaps, of, sustaining a proper democracy. So there is part of the explanation, don't forget. I'm bringing my own interpretation into this. Maybe it's too much. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But that's how I take it.
So I'm not really very clear about what was the substance of your question, in the sense that what were the possible potential other mechanisms that is available for other parties. So in that sense, I'll try to answer.
You can try to repeat it. Is it okay?
Think that they could influence AK Parti's reform processes. That was my question.
Yes, I understand that, but I don't understand how other groups may influence other parties. I mean, what do you mean by those mechanisms? I'm not very clear about that question. But let me just tell you like a couple things, if it's clear to you, so we can continue. So I think first of all, of course, we are making an analytical, we are making an analysis here, in the sense that we have to highlight some of those differences, in the sense that, I mean, it's not that AK Party is here and there are liberals and there is no connection between them and they are just getting together, make a decision on something, but there are liberals in AK Party and there are liberals who support AK Party rather than like other rest of the liberals. In that sense, there are these kind of like ambiguous positions in between. That's one thing. Second, I think AK Party, because there is no real basis of like conservative democracy in political discourse, so AK Party has to build that position by using some other like materials all around. So in that sense, because of this alliance, because AK Party gained many of its concepts from liberals, so in that sense, AK Party adopted some of those concepts as its own concept. So in that sense, the effect of liberals on this level is more conceptual, but it really creates the language of AK Party. And on another level, I think one of the other issues is because liberals like have strong personalities in Turkey, so they are useful on, again, like pushing AK Party discourse from one position to another by just writing columns on creating or proliferating critiques of AK Party and pushing AK Party onto certain positions. And lastly, in foreign media, I think, again, writings in foreign media or writings in English, so the liberals put more pressure on AK Party from outside, in the sense that creating a more pressure in international arena. And when AK Party members visit those countries, they get liberal critiques from those capitals onto themselves and has to sometimes change their positions depending on what those demands are. So I don't know whether this is satisfied.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps liberals should also learn to join streets like Tunisian and Egyptian liberals do. This is my... Okay, unfortunately